Hello, that's Patrick here once again. And today I've decided to share something very special. You know that I run a language school called Master Academy, and from time to time we organize this event called the Língua Master Experience. And I've decided to share the Língua Master Experience Volume 2 because the special guest we had there is Professor Tim Keeley. And this guy was like a role model for me for many years of my life. Um, so I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. We used English, Portuguese, a little bit of Spanish and Polish. He used a little bit of Japanese. You're gonna see Tim interacting not only with me but with our students as well and with people who wanted to join us. And from time to time, we have the Lingua Master experience. If you are interested in participating in one of these events, that's quite easy. Just follow Master Academy on Instagram, and you just need to give us your email when we are going to organize Lingua Master Experience Volume 3. So check it out.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, here we are. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I've been I've been following you for a long time. Since the first time I used it to work with a polyglot from Brazil called Jimmy Mello. So it's like more than
Yeah,
10
yeah,
years.
sure. Yeah, that was I met him back in Berlin, back at the
Yeah,
first. Yeah.
I remember you since there. So thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to use any language you want. Most of people speak Portuguese, English, and some of them speak Spanish. Um,
Um, are, are there other people here now?
uh, yes, they're going to join us. They are in the waiting room. I'm just
Oh,
testing
okay.
things.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring
So
him on in. Yeah, I mean, mainly I just talk a little bit about my experience, and then I prefer question and answer.
perfect. Let's
Okay,
go.
okay.
Let's see. Ah, there you go. Welcome. Bom, sejam todos bem-vindos à Língua Master Experience. A gente tem uma lenda viva aqui. E nem acredito que eu estou aqui, nem acredito que estou fazendo isso. Eu acompanho o Tim Keeley tem mais de 10 anos. Então eu confesso que eu fico um pouquinho sem palavras aí, porque é engraçado, né? Você vê assim, frente a frente, uma pessoa que você já acompanha há tanto tempo. E eu espero que vocês apreciem o trabalho do time e a história dele, a trajetória dele, tanto quanto eu. Né? Então, se eu tivesse que escolher hoje, assim, um role model, como um polyglot role model, seria o Tim Keeley. Então, Tim, seja muito bem-vindo e muito obrigado por estar aqui.
Ah, é meu prazer. Então, eu acho que é melhor que eu vou falar um pouco de minha vida, como eu estudei línguas e coisas assim, mas eu prefiro que a gente tenha perguntas e eu posso assim, contestar para as perguntas. Então, eu sou da Flórida, eu sou de Flórida, quer dizer que até os 18 anos eu morava perto de Miami. E a primeira língua adicional, o estrangeiro adicional, foi espanhol, estilo cubano, que, bueno, hablaba de cubano, es que, sí, que antes de ir a Colombia yo siempre hablaba así con el acento. Eu falava com um sotaque cubano que é um pouco difícil para algumas pessoas entender, mas quando eu tinha 18 anos, eu fui à universidade em Bogotá, Colômbia, Universidade dos Andes, e ali começou meu, como dizer, meu trajeto, meu viagem da vida poliglota, né? Porque em Colômbia eu estudei em espanhol, estudei português no Instituto Brasileiro de Língua e Escritura e francês, em Alliance Française, e alemão no Goethe Institut. E então estava aprendendo três línguas em uma língua estrangeira. Isso foi interessante para mim e eu acho isso me ajudou muito, porque eu já por fazer isso eu sabia o potencial, a possibilidade de aprender mais línguas. Então, isso foi no 1975, 76. Então, eu acho que vocês ainda não estavam no mundo. Se, tem gente que dizem que eu, bom, parece um pouco jovem, mas em agosto, em agosto, em 5 semanas, vou cumprir 68 anos. Então, como eu saí dos Estados Unidos quando eu tinha 18 anos, mais ou menos eu tenho passado eh, 5 décadas, 50 anos no exterior dos Estados Unidos. Durante essa época, eu voltei aos Estados Unidos para morar, para trabalhar ali. Então, realmente, mais ou menos 45 anos fora da América, né? A maior parte da minha vida é no Japão. E eu sou, como diz em português, cidadão japonês. Tenho nacionalidade japonês. E bom, agora estou falando português com vocês, porque eu gosto muito da sua língua, cultura, e a música, a literatura. Eu leí todas as obras de Jorge Amado, todas as obras. Gostei mais de tudo Gabriel do Cravo e Canela, e até que eu fui a Ilhéus para conhecer como foi a Ilhéus, porque esse lugar tem parte dessa novela. Então, eu também escutei a música brasileira muito, a música popular brasileira, como nessa época Maria Bethânia, Gal Costa, Gilberto Gil, Caetano Veloso, assim, Maria Creuza, muito. Fui a concerto de Doce Bárbaros no Rio no ano, eu fui ao Brasil 2 vezes, a segunda vez no ano, acho que foi 84, faz uns 40 anos. Então, em total, eu estive no Brasil mais ou menos 4 meses, em toda a minha vida, mas ainda lembro português. Não, eu acho que falo melhor depois de passar tempo no Brasil, mas ainda não tem agora não tem problema em entender, posso ler as novelas e tudo. Acho que também ajuda muito porque falava espanhol desde criança, não? Então é mais fácil, não? Eh, e, bom, depois eu estudei na Suíça. Agora eu estou em Suíça, não? Como é em português, Suíça ou Suíçária? Suíça, Suíça, assim. Então, assim que, momento, eh, eu vou trocar this background. No, no, where's my um, Zoom settings? 1 second. Let me see. Go to Zoom settings and background effects. Okay, so if I take the virtual background off, or how do you do that? Let me see. Virtual background video, virtual backgrounds, and none. Okay, so essa é a Suíça. Eu vou um pouco para fora para mostrar onde estou agora. É, oh, não está chovendo, estava chovendo antes. É, aqui estou. Isso é Lück, Lückebad, ja. Und man spricht Deutsch hier, das Schweizerdeutsch, ja. Das weiß ich nicht, kann das Schweizerdeutsch verstehen, aber das normale Deutsch, wie geht's? Ja, ich habe auch nicht weit studiert, aber auf Französisch, ja. Aber ich kann das Schweizerdeutsch ja etwas verstehen. I can understand Swiss German to a certain extent. German I'm quite okay with. Okay, coming back here. So, like a crazy polyglot, I'm switching languages on you. I guess everybody's into English, right? It's okay. All right. So, yeah. So give you more of a synopsis of my story. So I studied in Switzerland. Then I spent more time in the Slavic nations, first Yugoslavia and Serbo-Croatian. Srpsko-Hrvatska je prvi slovenski jezik koji sam učio. So Serbo-Croatian was the first Slavic language I learned. I тогда я был в Советском Союзе, в России, no, и тоже в Республика Советских Союзов 3 раза. And after that, I was in the Soviet republics in Russia 3 times. So Russia was my next Slavic language. And then I potem ja byłem w Polsce i ja studiowałem w Uniwersytecie tam w Poznaniu. Then later I was in Poland. I studied in the University of Poznan and Mickiewicz. And eventually I studied 9 Slavic languages. So I have a good, if you watch my channel, Polyglot Dreams, and YouTube, you can see that my video about Slavic languages is quite popular. I think around 170,000 views now, a lot of comments, because there's a lot of conflict with amongst Slavic nations too. Belarusian, Russian, Bulgarian, calling Macedonian the dialect, sometimes between the Serbs and the Croats and etc. But I love Slavic languages. So, okay. After that, in 1985, is when I immigrated to Japan. 初めて1985年、日本に行って、一番好き、住むところとして一番良かったかなと思ったので、残ってて日本人になった。So, I mean, Japan, after visiting many different countries, I felt was the best place for me to stay. And so basically, since 1981, I spent most of my time there and became a Japanese citizen. And I taught at the university in Japan, cross-cultural management in Japanese, but I also taught in Chinese, my graduate students there, and also in Taipei and Shanghai as adjunct, and Thai in Bangkok. I don't know if anybody here speaks Thai, but so I mean, maybe not so many polyglots in the northern hemisphere. I mean, well, not I mean northern, southern, in the Americas, and in Europe or into Asian languages. I mean, some people learn Chinese or Japanese or Korean, but actually what happened since 81, I focused a lot on Asian languages. So I studied in graduate school, a master's program in Chinese literature. Okay, 我在日本就读大学修学中文文学. So I studied 大学呢. So I studied Chinese literature there. And then, as I said, I also had a chance to work in Shanghai and Taipei. And I worked for 12 years, 3 months a year in Bangkok as an adjunct professor at Chulalongkorn. And I wrote a book in Thai, so I became very proficient in that language. And then over the years, also, I think the first went to Indonesia also on my way from Poland to Japan. I flew to Bangkok, and then I went to Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. And so that was the first time I started learning Indonesian Malay. And then Korean. And then in later years, in last, let's say 12 years or so, I got interested in Nepal. And I had Nepali students in Japan, so I learned Nepali. And then I helped with Hindi, and I started studying Tibetan and Tibetan-related languages. So, okay. Later, I went back to Europe sometimes. I learned Greek. Mattie Lencastre, itse in a conference. I was in Greece for a conference on cross-cultural psychology. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to learn how to speak Greek. I love the language. Agapo Ellenika. And then I started studying more Slavic languages. And then at the same conference, but in South Africa, the cross-cultural psychology conference, I decided, okay, I'm going to learn Afrikaans. Het gaat Afrikaans geleerd. Ik denk dat als je kan Engels, ja, Nederlands, Duits spreken, dan je kan het beetje Afrikaans ook verstaan. So I think you can understand some Afrikaans with English, German, of course with Dutch, because it comes from Dutch. Those changed quite a bit. I love that language. I studied a little bit of Zulu and Xhosa, but not very good. I'm still very much of a beginner. So my languages are the Romance languages, and I've dabbled in, and I'm making a video right now about Catalan. Je parle Catalan, but it's hard. When I first started, it's hard to get people to speak it with me because I was in the 70s. Now everybody speaks. I was just in Barcelona. And then Galician, gallego. Eu acho que vocês podem entender muito bem o gallego, é? Se fala espanhol, entre espanhol e português. Eu acho que só tem uns 5, 10% das palavras que são diferentes, que não existem em português ou espanhol. So I'm sure you can understand a lot of Galician the first time you hear it. So, and of course, Italiano. Italiano non è molto difficile per se parlare altre lingue di risi latine come portoghese e spagnolo. So, io non ho imparato molto italiano, so ho andato in Italia molto. I haven't really studied a lot of Italian. I think 10 hours, so I had to work on my grammar and such, but it's I could watch a movie, read a book. I was been in Italy a couple times, this summer. So I have no problem communicating in Italian. And then I learned français parce que j'ai étudié à Genève en français. So I studied in French when I was in Geneva, and as you know, I studied in Colombia. I've studied some Romanian, but it's a tough one for me. I was in Romania this year again. I have to work on that. And then, okay, 9 Slavic languages, and then Germanic, so German. And I studied Norwegian in Poland. And then I studied some Swedish and Danish, but mainly ik snakker beter norsk. There waren mannen som undervisade norsk i universitetet in Poland. There was a man who was professor teaching Norwegian, so I decided to learn it while I lived in Poland and took some trips there. And I'll be going to Norway next week, Sweden and Norway. Yeah, and then Afrikaans and Dutch, and so the major Germanic languages, I got that down. And then I guess oddball Greek, and then the Asian languages that I mentioned, or the Slavic languages. Okay. So altogether, I studied 47 languages, but 30 is, I always just say, okay, I mean, how many do you speak? That's a tough question for a polyglot. But how many have you studied or something like that? I've studied over 30, over enough, how should I say? I can communicate okay in 30 languages, okay, quite well in 20 or so. But for example, just like I'm sure you've maybe never studied Gallego, but you could probably communicate with somebody in it, right? So it depends how you want to count. But if you're counting languages, normally people won't do it that way. How many languages do you understand? How many do you speak? Once you start learning many languages, does it really matter? It's it's what you can communicate. So, for example, Richard Simcott and I go way back. Actually, I'm sure many of you know Richard Simcott, quite a famous, he was with the Polyglot Conference. Actually, the Polyglot Conference started because I invited him and Luca and a guy named Robert Biegler to a conference in Spain, an academic conference. Didn't work out. So Richard said, okay, let's start a conference of our own. And he had it in Budapest. So we go way back. And then if you ask Richard, you know, like would say how many languages you speak, he'll say I studied around 50. And that's more or less my answer too, but it doesn't mean that they're always at the tip of your tongue, right? Okay, but and then some that you didn't study so much, you can understand better than some that you studied a lot, okay? For example, por ejemplo, yo estudié tibetano, mucho tiempo pasé estudiando tibetano, pero como es muy diferente a los otros idiomas que yo sé, no es como catalán, que yo puedo entender la primera vez que lo escucho, o como también el eslovaco, así. So it really depends, you know. Depends on how close the languages you know. So sometimes I have a passive knowledge in the language I haven't studied much at all. That's very high. Could be even B1, B2 passive knowledge, you know, under listen, reading and understanding. But to speak it, you need to spend more time, right? You get rusty. Eu acho mesmo quando o português, quando eu falo português agora, eu acho que mais ou menos falo o jeito, mas tem vezes que eu não sei se eu sou assim, o espanhol ou uma coisa assim, ou dizendo algo que não é gramatical, não sei. Então, é mais ou menos a história. Então, eu gostaria passar o tempo desde agora bom, contestando seus perguntas, se você tem perguntas.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're gonna have a lot of questions. But then, in order to make that very interesting,
Wait. Let me put this back here. I couldn't hear you.
no,
Yeah, okay, got it.
uh, so I would like to start with the Q&A, and I invite you guys to, if you have some language in common with Tim Keeley, so please do it in the language that you feel comfortable doing it. So that could be Portuguese, Japanese, Spanish. I think pretty much any language you want to. So guys, make yourself at home. Of course, I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to save my questions for the
Okay,
end.
okay.
Let's see.
Okay, this is from Thales Diaz. Do you want to speak or just write? We can speak together if you like. All right, because I have to open the chat. Let me see, where's the chat thing? I just go to the chat. Okay, so yeah, you can write your answer or you can speak it. Okay, so if you'd learn another language from scratch, how would you approach language learning? Okay, so again, it always depends on what language from scratch. So if it's totally unrelated language, for example, I do want to learn Turkish and Turkish related languages because when I was in what they call, what we say, is Central Asia, Srednja Asia in Russian. I was there during the Soviet times, and those are most like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzia, and so on. By the way, I'm going to Kyrgyzstan in August, back again after many years. I just spoke Russian because I didn't know those languages at that time. And so for me, Turkish language is starting from scratch and don't have a lot of help from other languages, except for the fact that the structure of the language, the syntax, I'm used to, for example, Japanese syntax, verb at the end, postpositions, and many other factors which are shared by Turkish. And also I've studied Hungarian. So just some syntactical things are related. So how do I approach it? I think, well, I want to learn how to express very important things first. Okay, so how to introduce myself, say who I am, where I'm from, what I do, what I like to do, learn to ask other person's questions like, you know, what's your name, where you from, how old are you, where you this, blah, 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 on and on and on. So I try to concentrate on very practical conversations, and you can always find that in the textbook, you know. So, but we're blessed nowadays with the you know, AI, etc. Sometimes I ask, I pay for ChatGPT 4, and I ask it at times to help me with dialogues in a new language. I'll say, okay, I want to, I'll give it to, I'll write what I want to say in English more or less, and I say, okay, so just expand this, and if I'm talking to two people, between two people, and rarely does it make a mistake. You know, it usually gets it down quite nicely. So the point, and then if I hire somebody from, you know, teachers on like italki platform or something like that, I say, okay, could you record this so I, you know, can study. I like to study myself mainly. Um, so I like to put a lot of effort in myself. I just don't say, okay, I'm going to learn Turkish, so I'm going to hire a teacher. I don't know anything, teach me. I don't, and that's not my way of doing it. I kind of think it's a waste of money too. I try to put in as much effort as I can, and then I'll go ahead and seek assistance, either, you know, through sometimes exchange or pay for it, to help me out. And so that's a case of a language, you know, that's totally new for me. Um, and then as I try to use different materials. I usually will go to a textbook. If, for example, Turkish, I do have Complete Turkish, you know, the colloquial series, Teach Yourself Turkish, things like that. I just haven't used it yet. Go to a textbook, do a lot of listening. So again, that is a case of a language that I don't know any cognate languages, you know? So I don't know if you guys are studying, if you don't speak Spanish, you're going to study Spanish very differently than you studied English, right? And English also is, there's a lot of cognates between Portuguese, Spanish, English, Italian, etc. But let's say that you're going to study German. You're going to study Spanish, rarely different than the way you're going to study German, because in Spanish you can jump into a lot of media at first, and you can learn a lot just through media and looking at translation and going that, and then you can look at differences in grammar because you, for example, use a subjunctive. In German, there is no subjunctive like that, you know. So you say si eu fosse da da da. You say si eu fuera. You learn to say si eu tivesse dinheiro eu da 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 da. Okay, same thing, right? And so your approach to studying is to be quite different. Yeah, and then I guess I've covered the question pretty well. If you want more specific, please ask. Okay. Hi Tim. Primeiramente, parabéns para o Master Encontro. Okay, thank you. Meu perigo para responder a curiosidade disso. Qual foi o dia mais? Okay, so that's hard to say which was the most challenging. All right. É difícil dizer qual foi o idioma mais desafiador que eu aprendi, porque tem que, tem que distinguir das vários aspectos das línguas, não? Eu oh, né? Como vai? Tudo bem? Sai lá. Você entende? Eu vou, posso contestar em inglês, tá bem? Sim? Bom, ok, eu vou
Sim,
seguir.
sim. E eu entendo muito assim, essa
Ah,
dificuldade depende muito da proximidade, né, do idioma nativo. Isso a gente já aprende bastante, inclusive com o Patrick, né, assim, que é mais desafiador, que é mais distante da língua, vai ser mais diferente, mais difícil. Mas esse caso
é,
seria mais assim para você mesmo.
sim. Não, eu acho que para escrever, mais que tudo é japonês, né? O japonês é mais difícil para escrever. Eu comecei a estudar português em Polônia. Japonês em Polônia. E depois de chegar em Japão, eu comecei a estudar em chino. Então, tem os kanjis, Hanzi. You have your characters, but in Japanese you also have hiragana, katakana. Mas o difícil é que tem muitas pronunciações para as kanji. There are many different pronunciations for Japanese characters. So it actually can be more challenging in Chinese. So Japanese Chinese are the most challenging for writing and reading. And then for, let's say, oh, by the way, let me mention one thing. Eu quero mencionar que agora com a tecnologia é diferente. Quer dizer, quando eu comecei a estudar chino e japonês, tinha que saber como escrever, ou não pode usar o dicionário. Se não sabe como escrever. You have to use stroke count and radical. It's the only way to look up the dictionary. Se você não sabe como é a pronúncia, então tem que fazer assim. Foi mais difícil. Então, it's also the same case in Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia, Malay. People think that's an easy language to learn, but if you try to learn it without a computer, without internet, and you try to look up a word, you'll have to know the root of the word. Because, for example, you have the word belajar, and you say, oh, what's belajar? So you go to a dictionary, B. No, it's not there. Then you hear mengajar, and you go to M. No, it's not there. And then you say pelajaan. Okay, so belajar is to study, mengajar is to teach, pelajaan is a lesson. None of these, you won't find them in the dictionary like it would be first letter. You have to know that ajar is the root. So you go to the dictionary, you look up ajar, and under that is belajar, mengajar, and so on. Okay, so you can't learn. It's much more difficult. It's easy nowadays. It's different nowadays. You have technology. Okay, so then next I would say pronunciation. So we have writing system, and for pronunciation for me, of course, I was a Zulu, and also are the most difficult, but I don't speak them well. For a language that I can speak fairly well, I would say the most difficult is Vietnamese. And I learned Chinese as a tonal language first, okay? And I thought, okay, 我觉得那个中文是一点难，因为有这个声音 that has a tone, so a little bit difficult. But then I learned Thai, and Thai is more difficult to pronounce than Vietnamese. It has one more tone, and then also it says 6 tones, but Standard Mandarin actually has a neutral tone, could call it 5. But Thai has a lot of vowel sounds that don't exist in Western language, like oi. So, this is kind of hard to learn it first. You can't, and it's hard to figure out how to write it in Roman letters. You have to learn the Thai alphabet. So pronunciation, I would say probably, yeah, you could find more difficult languages, but from what I studied, Vietnamese was most challenging. But then I learned to speak both Southern and Northern dialects. And I have a Vietnamese friend who speaks Central and Southern. She has a hard time pronouncing the Northern, where I don't have that because I don't have the block. For example, she has a hard time saying gua sound, guai, gua. She says yua with that kind of sound. And it's quite different, like Northern, if it has a z sound. You say, what time is it now? You say, bây giờ rồi. In the South, you say, bây giờ rồi. You have a sound, okay. So now Vietnamese is not difficult for me. Of course, I can always improve my pronunciation and such, but yeah, I got over the first big hump. Okay, then finally, I would say grammar. So again, we have writing, pronunciation, grammar for a challenge. Basicamente, eu acho que é mais difícil que eu estudar é húngaro, Hungarian. Mas também as línguas eslávicas, mais que tudo o polaco, język polski jest bardzo trudny, a gramática. It's quite difficult. It's got the most exceptions of the Slavic languages. It's because of the cases, like German has like nominative, dative, accusative. Okay, there's 7 cases used in most Slavic languages, 6 in the others which don't. Bulgarian and Macedonian, no. But all the others use at least 6, if not 7 cases. And you have all grammatical gender, feminine, masculine, like you do in Portuguese, and neuter, but you have to change. They have to change for all the cases, and the singular and the plural. It's quite challenging in that sense. There's so many possible endings. So grammatically, I say Slavic language, Hungarian. Yeah. Assim é. Para mim, isso foi o desafio, né? Okay, we have something else. Okay, so usaríamos sempre fora seu objeto da vida. Eu não posso dizer que sempre fora meu objeto da vida, mas quando eu tinha mais ou menos 6 anos, eu lembro que eu sentava no quarto e escutava o rádio de onda corta, idiomas de todo o mundo. Eu estava fascinado. Então, eu queria aprender. E eu também tinha National Geographic, eu via as culturas de vários países do mundo que eu queria explorar. Em algum momento você esse plano uma pessoa. Yeah, I would say o momento que eu pensei que eu vou falar muitas línguas foi quando eu fui à Colômbia, quando eu tinha 18 anos de idade. Eu comecei a estudar na universidade quando eu tinha 16 anos. Então, quando eu fui à Colômbia, já tinha. I also took some exams for getting university credit. So I was almost graduated at age 18, but I just said, no, okay, I go to Colombia. Then in Switzerland to study before I graduate. Ok, so quando eu estava na Colômbia, eu estava Bogotá é uma cidade muito grande, tem muito assim oportunidade para aprender outras línguas, como tem os institutos de idiomas, como like Brazilian or the Goethe Institute, the Alliance Française, etc. So eu pensei, oh, eu tenho oportunidade agora aprender e também estava encontrando outra gente viajando pelo mundo, de Alemanha, de outros países, então eu tinha oportunidade de falar essas línguas também. Eh, as coisas foram acontecendo, pode responder por espanhol, inglês, português. Bueno, okay, I just read the end, I could answer in all three. Okay, so there we go. Yeah. um, okay, yeah, Tars, go ahead. Either orally or
Thank
written.
you, Patrick. Uh, so I would like to ask you just like could you give us like the three best tips that you ever had about language learning? And another thing I was thinking about, it would be interesting if you talk about how is language learning nowadays and how it was before. Because
Ah,
before I could never learn Japanese at that level so quickly. So,
日
so
本語を勉強してるんですか？
と思うんですけど、
うん。
話せる
まあ、そういう
ことができる。
技術なければ、もう勉強するのは難しい。先ほど私が説明したように、やっぱり知らない漢字がだったら、辞書引かなきゃならない。辞書引くのはすごく難しかった。
いっ
Yeah, I
ぱいある
mean,
んですけど。
yeah, yeah. So what I'm saying here in Japanese is that, yeah, as I mentioned, because when you study in the past and you didn't have the internet, then again, I gave you the example of Indonesian, right? The same would be in Arabic, where the dictionaries are set up differently than they are in Portuguese or English or many other languages, in which you just go by the first letter, rather they go by the root of a word. And then again, when you get into the case of Japanese and Chinese, dictionaries are based. At that time you could buy a dictionary that was lists of words according to their pronunciation in pinyin, the Roman letter type way of writing Chinese. But if you see a character, you don't know its pronunciation, how are you going to look it up? You can't. Okay, if you ask it, how do you say this word? They say it, and you hear it, then you can look up in the dictionary. But if you're studying by yourself and you run to a word, you can't look it up. Okay, you can't copy and paste into Google and everything happens that quickly. So, I mean, there's the good and the bad. I can appreciate so much this way of learning now because it's so much easier. But also, okay, so you know that Japanese is not my native language, and I actually started studying it from age around 24 and immigrated there at 25. So, yeah, I've spoken it for more than 42 years, but there are certain things I can do that young Japanese cannot do in Japanese. For example, in writing, I can, with older people before the internet, if I want to write, for example, country, I can write it very quickly by hand. I can even do the traditional, say Chinese, which is much more difficult. Okay, so I know the stroke. I can quickly count the stroke. I know the radical. I know the strokes. But young people, they never have to practice that. Just in elementary school, they do some writing, and afterwards they're just using their thumbs, to write on the phone and such, right? So I think they lack the same ability to. They don't have the recall from the hand of writing characters. They don't have that physical memory. So yeah, okay. So we're talking about the big differences in back then. Another one, even before the internet, you had differences. So when I was in Bogota, so it's 1975, 1976. So yeah, I go to school to learn, French, Portuguese, and German. And so I have a teacher and I can get the pronunciation there. And I was given the linguaphone set, which is a linguaphone. You can look it up and Google it, and you'll see that it comes in a nice case, a textbook, dialogues, and little records. You had to have a record player to play it. Later they came out with cassette tapes. All right, so it was a little bit more inconvenient. It couldn't, use an app or just take out your have things on your phone or some, listening. So the big revolution in my language learning was in 1977, I believe it was. Walkman came out, the Walkman cassette player. So I could then put in a cassette and listen to a language as I walk down the street and, go running or something or working. And so, wow, okay, that was a big revolution. Because before then you couldn't carry your record player around. I did have a cassette player that was quite large, but it's a little unwieldy to carry it around to play it. Okay, but once we had portable sound, then you could practice listening to your languages in all different types of situations. And I think that because I came from that background, I appreciate it more. And I don't know if young people, they appreciate it enough, the access they can have to listen to languages.
Tim, do you think that they feel more like just like you, grateful for those things?
I think
Or
so.
do
I
you
think
think
so.
they feel more like
Less
overwhelmed?
curious.
It could be both. It could be both. Overwhelming because there's so much that can come at you. But also then the habits that you develop because you could not just listen to a language anywhere. If I were at a shopping mall anywhere, I hear somebody speaking a language that I'm studying, I run up to them and I say, "Oh, I'm studying your language. Please talk to me." And you don't get that as much now, people, because they think, "Oh, yeah, it's not such a big deal, right? You could go online, you could pay somebody to talk to you, a teacher, or easily." But can you imagine that before I went to Bogota, where I was living, there were no Portuguese teachers or German teachers or French teachers outside of like a university or maybe a high school. And so you really couldn't even hire somebody to teach you. It would be difficult. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine you want to study Japanese? Okay, maybe you live in São Paulo and you go to Liberdade. Você pode encontrar japonês na Liberdade que pode ensinar pouco, não sei. But you know what I mean? Back then, it depends where you live. If you live and if you don't live in São Paulo or Rio or somewhere like New York, if you live in New York, you can find somebody. You couldn't even find a teacher. So limited how you can study. And nowadays, as I said, when the first question that was asked, okay, where I think you're asking how would I approach learning, right? And I said,
I don't know if you
yeah,
I asked
that was the
at
first question you
the
asked.
same time.
You
I
said
asked it like yeah. But I
you
I
said
did
if you
also
learn
ask
another language, yeah.
your best 3 tips, if you could say like
Oh, the
afterwards.
best 3 tips? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a totally new language, my first tip is write a narrative, as I was talking about. Okay. So in other words, you want to think, go start with this way. First tip, how am I going to use the language? Okay, am I going to just use it for travel? Therefore, or I'm interested, so just meeting people who speak that language. Okay, in that case, then I want to know all the basics. Hello, how you doing? Where you from? You want to be able to talk about yourself. You want to be able to ask the questions of the person. So those are the things you want to learn first. And so I suggest you do that using you can use Deepo depending on the language or Google, ChatGPT, various sources, and then if you can have somebody check it just to make sure. Okay. But the first thing is really think, how am I going to use the language, and concentrate on that vocabulary and those sentences. So that's number one. Because I have a video on my YouTube channel, Polyglot Dreams, um, in which I say, okay, fluency in 7 steps. And my point in that video is that you can be fluent at various levels of learning. You can be fluent as, let's say, A1, A2, just beginner. Why? Because fluency means you speak fluently. You don't hesitate. So if you learn to say, for example, 私は、ティム・キリーです。今日本人ですけど、その前私はアメリカで生まれて、そしてその後は、and you learn how to start to introduce yourself and talk to somebody else in the language. And if you could do it fluently and with a good accent and prosody, then people have the impression that you speak quite well. Okay. And so then also they tend to speak back to you more normally. And so I think that's important, is learn first what you want to, how you're going to use the language, learn the right dialogues and vocabulary. And then next would be practice it a lot, okay, on a daily basis. Memorize it. If you write 1 page about yourself, memorize it, and wake up every day and say it from the beginning to the end. And if it's a difficult language to pronounce, then have somebody record it, a native, and then, repeat it, okay? And also, I'm impressed by AI. A lot of the AI you pay for now can put on a good accent, okay? So, I mean, the possibility to learn is more and more. The problem is with that change in technology, sort of going off tangent here, is that people say, why do I need? Porque eu tenho que aprender outro idioma. Eu posso usar meu telefone para falar com você. I think the next technology is, eu estou falando português e você está, eu estou falando inglês e você está olhando português. Okay, maybe it changes, I talk to my phone and you hear my voice, you even hear my voice say in your own language. I'm sure that technology, that's possible now. I'm sure with the present technology, that is possible. It's possible now. So, yeah. So narrativa, narrativa, and then fluency, okay, in blocos, exactly. So those blocks are the things that you want to say about yourself, want to ask other people, okay, and your interests, etc. So nobody, não tem ninguém que pode falar como é em português? Com fluidez ou como é? Como dizer em português?
Confluência, com fluidez.
Ok, com fluência, com fluidez. Sobre tudo. About everything. Impossible. If I say, okay, I say, Patrick, você pode falar em português sobre quantum physics?
No, not really.
Okay, so, we're always learning you put it in blocos, in certain, let's say, topics or domains. We're always, we have our ability to speak differently about different things, right? So it's the same, obviously, the foreign language. So you want to concentrate on those things that you really want to know. A good example is when I learned Tamang, which is a Tibetan-related language spoken mainly in Nepal, 5% of the population, but also surrounding areas. I had a student of mine from Nepal help me make a phrase book for trekking. So I learned to say things like, how far is it from here? Is the trail Is the trail going up or going down? Is it slippery? Is there any, is it easy to stay on the trail, or is it a little bit, things like that, okay? Where can I find lodging? All these things that you wouldn't learn the first thing you say. You know, I learned how to say, you know, like I would say, lasso, I would say, lasso fafala, you know, so how are you doing and things like that, of course. But after that, I learned to talk about, you know, trekking and the things, information I wanted to know, rather than, you know, if you go to some dialogue, it's talking about totally different things what you learn in a textbook. So you need to really take over, as was mentioned before, what you're going to learn, which is so much more possible nowadays. So third tip. That's a tough one. I mean, those are the most important ones for me. I guess the third, I could say be consistent, right? So it's much better if you can study some every day, and that you seek to progress. So now in my case, you know, I have over 5 decades. Yeah, I have over 5 decades of studying language intensively. All right, because eu vou cumprir 68 anos e eu comecei a estudar em Colômbia português, francês e alemão quando tinha 18 anos. Okay, it's 50 years of studying. So I've trained myself. My mind functions differently than younger people, even younger polyglots. If you don't have the same experience, you don't think. The more experience you have, the more it changes how you study and how you think and how quickly you can learn. Because if you know, you're studying Japanese now, and then if you study Korean next, then you'll say, oh, I know that. 90% of the vocabulary, not the vocabulary, but the structure, yeah, it's similar. And you say, watashi wa 저는, and then you know, 한국말을 공부해요. You know, 한국어 を勉強してます. You know, like that. You learn, it's structured the same way and things, right? So the more languages you learn, easier. There are other languages can be related. And Korean and Japanese are not considered related languages. I don't know why. The vocabulary is only similar when it's a sign of vocabulary, but that's over 50% of the vocabulary. For example, whenever you have two characters together, like jikan, time, tempo, then in Korean it would be shikan, jikan, shikan. If you say gakusei, student, then you have hakuseng, and so on. So, you know, they just, difference in pronunciation. The same in Vietnamese, the same in Cantonese or Mandarin, etc. Yeah, so I say it's consistency, and then for me, though, consistency just means living my life now, more or less, because I run into the opportunity to use the language, and I'm making videos, right? So actually, for the last 2 months, I'm working for a Ling app, Ling, and yeah, the video about Asian languages. A couple, but anyway, because I'm working for the Ling app, that also helps me making videos, because I get some income just to make videos, and then it can go on my channel too. So I'm happy that's going on, but then there's certain languages I have to get into. So I take some more deep dives into other languages and do some language comparisons. So I just let that that's my consistency. Just do what makes sense at the time. But if you're in a younger stage of learning, your consistency says, okay, so I've learned English and now Japanese or maybe French or Spanish or German, whatever. And your consistency is going to be which ones, how do I work on each one? You know, how do I divide up my time? How do I make sure I stay with them, right? But I'm at the point where I have so many, I can't do this all languages, so I just concentrate on those I use in the near future.
Oh, I have a question on my own, because you're mentioning that it gets easier. And then I have been dealing with Slavic languages for the last 10 years. And then that's true. I feel they get easier and easier. But then at the same point, it's quite difficult for me to maintain them separately. So it happens a lot to me that I'm trying to speak Macedonian and out of nowhere, out of the blue, I start speaking a little bit of Russian, and I was like, no, okay, that's Russian. But then, is there a strategy against that? Can I really over?
Okay, so you know my history with Slavic languages, and you've seen my video. And so I have a very high understanding of all Slavic languages, okay? And the lowest I would have is, say, like a B1 understanding in Slovene or something. So far, when I speak, I don't have much problem with Polish or Russian, and not so much with Serbo-Croatian, okay? Kada ja sam bio tam je srpsko-hrvatski, okay? Now, sad je srpski, ja hrvatski. No, they have different textbooks and everything, but, you know, I'm going to do a video. My next video is going to be on BCMS, Bosnian, Croatian, Montenegrin, and Serbian. One language or four? And of course, the answer is one language. But I mean, it's so controversial. I just go back to that controversy again and do a video on it, because also the Ling channel is specialized in Slavic, and they want that for that part of the channel. So that's a good controversial one. But anyway, yeah, I had the same issue as you do, and I've been doing it for decades. There's no easy way around it. You just need practice. So it happens, for example, when I was at the Polyglot conference in Prague, so you know, somebody with me was so surprised the way I was speaking Czech. I mean, I just get on conversation with anybody in Czech. I've studied Czech for maybe 8 to 10 hours. Slovak, I've studied many hours, but on the Czech only 8 to 10 hours. But I know the difference. I know I'm not mluviti, ne hovoriti, and things like that. So I know how to change things, right? But at times I'm just putting in Slovak. And I do it, but in that case, it's kind of like positive, because if I don't know in Czech, I just use a Slovak or Polish, right? Now, the problem comes when you actually want to speak it purely, speak pure Slovak, speak pure Czech. And that's not easy, because I think the way that you can make it happen is you have to identify with the language and the culture. You have to kind of feel part of it. So, kiedy mówię po polsku, nie ma tak problem, bo ja byłem w Polsce 2 lata. I was there 2 years, and ja czułem się jak Polakiem. I felt like Polish, a Polish person at that time. And so my Polish I don't usually have any interference there. И тоже, когда я был в России, но я говорю лучше по-россии, сербско-хорватски, because I speak Russian better because I spent more time there and had more interaction. And I don't know if you noticed, I think I said something about it in one of my videos where I speak 34 language. I was just on TV in the Soviet Union at a program, okay, they call it Amazing People. It's one of those Got Talent type things. I was there as a polyglot. They paid my way to go to Moscow from Japan. So I hadn't been there since the Soviet time. So I really enjoyed going. Some people criticized me for going on state TV in Moscow while they're invading Ukraine. But I mean, that's their point of view. I love Ukraine. I love Russia. So I think Putin sucks. I think that what's going on is terrible. But that wouldn't stop me from learning the language and such. I mean, I think some people overreact in that sense, right? Se fosse assim, então, quando estava no Brasil, tinha uma ditadura militar. Eu vou dizer, eu não vou aprender português porque tem uma ditadura militar aqui. Não. You have to kind of put politics aside and learn. But the same, Patrick, with the Slavic language is a big challenge. Again, the more Slavic language you learn, the easier it is for you to understand the other ones, right? And the easier it is for you to adjust. So what you studied? Russian, Macedonian, what else? Any others?
So I started with Russian, and then Ukrainian, and then Belarusian, Polish, then now Macedonian.
Oh, okay. Did you go very far in Polish?
Yes.
Okay, all right. To znaczy bardzo dobrze rozumiem, kiedy ja mówię po polsku, nie ma problemu, tak?
Tak. Mój mózg jest.
Okay, all right. So yeah, but you've gone a really difficult route, because Ukrainian and Belarusian are very similar. And then I don't know if you watched my video where I say that
All of,
Ukrainian is the the Ukrainian is the bridge between Russian and Slovak and Polish, right? Okay. And one person just said, one Polish person, I'm so happy about that comment because they know what they're talking about, said, uh, yeah, I always felt that, but you've shown it scientifically. You know, at least I use the app to show the sentences and analyze grammar and such, you know, and the vocabulary. But yeah, you've gone a really tough route because you're picking language like the as I say, Ukrainian and the Belarusian is very similar. So of course it makes it easier to understand. You get good at one, you get good at understanding the other quite well. It speeds up progress. But speaking in a pure sense makes it difficult. Yeah. But it was funny that, so Macedonian, I would think if you study Bulgarian, that's the hardest because you start mixing those two. It depends on how purist you are. If you just want to communicate, you don't have to worry about it. People understand you, you know. It's like I was talking to Richard Simcott about that because he's lived in Macedonia for a long time, you know, and his wife is Macedonian, it's the main Slavic language he speaks. But he said to himself, I'm never going to learn Bulgarian because I don't want to, you know, it's too close. And then he did learn Bulgarian because it's actually closer than Spanish and Portuguese, right? So it's kind of a challenge, you know. I guess it's like learning, you know, Galician or something, you know. Yeah, I don't, Patrick, the only thing I say is just experience and it's feeling, you know, you have to, I think it's more, it's not only here, but it's in the heart, you know, so you need more interaction in the language with people, and then you kind of build up the emotion, and then you kind of identify with the language and the people. When you're just studying it and don't have the interaction or traveling there, then it's tougher to keep it apart. But I have a lot of experiences in Polish, a lot in Russian, and the next would be a lot in Serbo-Croatian. So those are easier ones. The next experience I have would be in Slovak. Okay, so that's what I think. Yeah, there's no easy way to solve that one.
right. I guess we have one last question here because I would like to be speaking here forever, but I think that's
Well, we can
not
do
good.
it again. Mhm.
Oh, that's nice. I would like to download your brain. I think that's not possible. We have a question here that's like, você já iniciou um idioma e desistiu ao longo do processo?
I'm sorry, I missed that. One more time, please.
No,
Is
yeah,
it
it's here.
lonely?
Você já iniciou um idioma e desistiu ao longo do processo?
Oh, I see here. Okay. I didn't know. Eu não sabia que você estava falando português. Estava pensando que falando em inglês. E foi, eu não entendo. Ok, você já iniciou no idioma. Eu disse, if I gave up in the middle. Yeah. Eu acho que assim é com Zulu. Mas my attitude wasn't that, okay, I really got to learn Zulu and I just give up. It's like, oh, I'm kind of busy now. I'll get back to it someday. Mas pode dizer que eu desisti de estudar Zulu, né? Porque eu comecei a estudar Zulu há 4 anos, né? E ainda não voltei a estudar. So that might be the case. There's not many. Yeah. Usually I keep on going. But I guess and I got to get back to Tibetan, or I'm going to feel that that's one of the languages because I put a lot of effort in Tibetan, but I haven't studied it for the last year or so because I've been so busy that you just get into things, you know. So yeah, but I don't worry about it. I mean, I just want to enjoy life, and then I'm going to put the effort in if I'm going to use the language. Yeah. 1 out of 47. Maybe a few more. It depends. I mean, I've gone to a certain level and I didn't do enough to continue with it. Yeah. I
Tim.
always, yeah.
No, sorry, kid, go ahead. I just
No, go ahead. No, I'm done with that. Go ahead.
No, just a thought of mine. I was thinking about like, you know, it's common sense that we have to listen a lot and have this massive input. Everybody talks about it, but in my own experience, like learning languages, I speak like 6, and I'm trying to learn more too. But so I I I was always studying and learning languages on my computer from
Hmm.
home. And then what I have experienced is that it takes a lot to pick up that piece of information that I really want to learn. So I had to listen a lot in order to learn, I don't know, a basic structure or
Hmm.
like a sentence, vocabulary. You're talking about vocabulary, right? So that specific vocabulary that I wanted to know in the very first days. So because of that, I thought like, okay, it's taking too much time here. So I'm going to do the differently. So I just choose. Now I have my own material that I have like a 100 most frequently Q&As and
Hmm.
answers. So I have the questions and answers and different
Hmm.
ones.
Hmm.
So I know that if I'm gonna start learning a new language, I just gonna start translating that material. And then I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Hmm.
know I don't need to like listen 100 hours of like check, for instance, to grab
No,
some pickups sometimes here and there.
yeah, you want to spend your listening time effectively, and that means you want to be
Exactly, exactly.
you want to be listening and ingrain in you the things that you use the most. And so the 100 most commonly used questions and answers is obviously something that listening to over and over again till you have it down, is a very effective use of your time. Yeah.
Yes, so I was just thinking about like, I mean, that's my thought on it because on my own experience, I thought that I was spending a lot of time hearing podcasts and YouTube videos and
They could
whatever
be talking about things
series.
that you're not that you won't be using. Yeah. I
Exactly. So
I I I say
I'm
that
getting
for when you're at
immersed,
a
but
higher level. Yeah.
exactly. I was getting immersed. I mean, a lot exposed to the language for a lot of period of time, but my output wasn't
Mm.
there yet at
Yeah,
all.
because your comprehensible input wasn't high enough. In other words, you need to understand a lot of what's there. I mean, you can do it for
Exactly.
fun. Sometimes I'll listen to a language which I don't understand that well just to get the melody and the prosody. But I don't spend a lot of time doing that. The most effective is, we just discussed there that you focus listening on things which you understand quite well, and then when you create your own material, that's what you're doing.
And
So,
and
yeah, so let me say one final thing here you might be interested in self-promotion. Okay, my YouTube channel is Polyglot Dreams. And I also have polyglotdreams.com. And there I have blogs and such, but I have my memoir, Life in 30 Languages. And it's available as an ebook or to Amazon and such. But what I'm doing is I'm translating more and more languages. The Portuguese is done, but the Portuguese is now being made into an audiobook, and the guy who's doing an audiobook for me is also checking the Portuguese again to make sure it's good. But what I do is in the book I have English, Portuguese, English, Portuguese, and Portuguese, so you can study English that way. But I also make, for example, Portuguese, Portuguese, Japanese, Portuguese when it's ready, okay? Portuguese, Chinese, etc. And various different combinations of languages so that people can study that way. And I think when you're talking about, if you have the narrative, you can listen to it as an audiobook. I think that's different than just listening to a podcast, because if you find, for example, my book interesting about my life, and you go to chapter 1, and first you read it in a language that you know well, and then you go paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, to make sure you understand it, and then you listen to it over and over. And then and I talk about so many different things. But see, you've already read it in either Portuguese or English or a language you understand well. So you understand what's coming at you. So it's comprehensive input, even when it's a difficult discussion.
mm,
And then that's why I'm making it, because I think that's a very effective way to go from, for example, upper beginner or intermediate to a higher level, because you are being exposed to a lot more vocabulary. But unless, if you listen to a podcast or something and you don't have the text with you before, you haven't been able to read it, you haven't made sure you understand it well. I always think you should study with the text and the audio together. Then it won't stick with you as much. You can enjoy those things and try to understand them, but for your real progress, you need to be able to. So even if it's a challenge, like if for example, you had my book in English and let's say what's out now, Italian, okay. Well, Italian is easier for you as a Portuguese speaker, but um, even if you've never studied Italian, as a Portuguese speaker, if you read it in English and then you listen to it in Italian, and you get down to understand everything, and then maybe look up a few words because it's interesting to you, you would be surprised how quickly you will progress. But that's because you understand everything. So basically you need a text. I say study with a text and audio.
Nowadays, I just put like a vocabulary above immersion at the very first beginning, because I just need to laser focus on the things that I really want to say and do. But do you think like polyglots, they are concerned? I mean, I don't think, I don't see that as well, but trying to create their own, not their own material, but I mean a material like other materials that we have
Well, yeah,
nowadays.
many polyglots I know do create their own material, but they're using also, and I know a lot of polyglots who make the apps and such, Anki or something like that, Anki cards, right? You make your own stack, memorize. I don't tend to use that so much, but yeah, you can create your own material that way, very customized. And as I said, I think creating your own dialogues and narratives is very important.
Oh, I think we're coming to an end. And Tim, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And at the end, normally I play a game with the special guests, but I think that today I'm going to regret so much that I call that the hot seat. So normally I bring the polyglots there and we switch between languages that we have in common. But I think that today is going to be a difficult game because we have a lot of languages there, and actually, I think it's going to be a problem for me. But then, let's see. Um, well, ok. Pues primero en español, creo que es más fácil empezar por ahí. Me habló de un acento cubano, pero hoy creo que hablas de otras maneras también, ¿no? Porque me hablabas y escuchaba como un poco de acento colombiano, un poco de... ¿Hay una preferencia? ¿Hay algo como me gusta este
No,
acento? Sí.
bueno, lo que pasa es que cuando yo llegué a Colombia y si hablaba con, bueno, más o menos el acento cubano, quiere decir rápido, cortando las palabras, eso es muy parecido al costeño en Colombia. Todo el Caribe es muy así parecido en ese sentido. O también chileno. Por ejemplo, ellos dicen mercado, mercado, y cosas así. Bueno, mi acento depende del momento. Si estoy hablando como cubano, entonces yo puedo hablar mejor como cubano. Si estoy hablando con un rollo de Bogotá, entonces bueno, otra vez yo me siento como estuviera allí otra vez. Y también eso pasa con el porteño. Tengo menos práctica en el porteño, pero cuando yo hablo con los argentinos, yo también cambia manera de hablar. I begin to have the same kind of accent, such. But yeah, as I say, bueno, con lo que pasa con el español, no, bueno, no sé, siempre soy así, a veces mezclando el acento, eso depende de lo que oigo, lo que escucho.
Ale to jest bardzo fascynujące, ale teraz mówiąc to było koszmar, to była bardzo trudna gramatyka, no. Ale też, nie wiem, Myślę, że po polsku wymowa to jest po prostu koszmar, nie? Na przykład,
Tak, wymowa polska, jak powiedziałem tam na video, Grzegorz Mickiewicz, w książce w Wyczyszczenie, no, i też tak, no, po prostu przepraszam, to nie jest łatwo, no, excuse me, przepraszam, to, no, no, ale jak ja byłem tam, no, jak powiedziałem, byłem tam 2 lata i codziennie mówię po polsku i dlatego nie jest tak trudno dla mnie. Ale dla innych, ja myślę, jest najtrudniejszy wśród wszystkich słowiańskich języków.
vielleicht das ist einfacher als zum Beispiel Tschechisch oder das ist dasselbe, Tschechisch und Polnisch.
Aber Tschechisch ist ein bisschen ähnlich in diesem Sinn, aber Tschechisch hat nicht so viel diese Konsonanten zusammen, ja, wie auf Polnisch. Ja. Sie haben auch natürlich die Sch, Ch, J, der R, alle, oh ja, ich muss auf Deutsch sprechen, ja, aber nicht zusammen, ja. Und was interessant ist, ist, dass jetzt ich hier in der Schweiz und ich fahre mit meinem Auto nur 10 oder 20 Kilo und ich muss Französisch sprechen. Und und der andere Seite muss ich Deutsch sprechen. Und manchmal, wenn die Leute mit mir auf Deutsch sprechen, ja, ist normale Deutsch, ja, es ist Schweizer Hochdeutsch. Aber wir haben ja, die haben einen Akzent, das ist, ja, für mich sehr, sehr schön, sehr schön, das ist Schweizerdeutsch, ja. Und auch dieser Akzent hier für Hochdeutsch, auch in die Schweiz. Weil ich habe in Bayern gearbeitet und ich habe mit vielen Leuten, die Bayerisch sprechen, gearbeitet. Ja.
Right. Okay, I think this game would be too long because we can okay.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
gets pretty.
I think I have to eat dinner now. Tenho que jantar. Mas prazer. Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much for joining us once
Yeah.
again.
Okay. Hope to see you guys again. We're going to do it again.
See you soon.
Yeah. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.